The heart monitor began to scream the way a hawk cries at noon. Sharp, merciless, warning the whole world that something sacred was slipping away. "Mr. Adeyemi, breathe," said the young nurse, her voice steady even as rain battered the glass walls of the museum atrium. She pressed 2 fingers to the paper-thin skin on the 85-year-old billionaire's wrist and felt the flutter stumble like an old man missing the last step on a staircase. The gurney sat inches from the gallery doors. Beyond them, beneath a floodlight that shone like a pale moon, waited a single carved talking drum on a black pedestal. "This is it," rasped the old man. His eyes, cloudy like wet granite, clung to the drum. "Arrow. I named it Arrow. I was 16. Behind them, a convoy of black cars screeched to a stop. Men in dark suits spilled out, huddling under umbrellas. A woman in an emerald dress shouted through the storm, "Keisha, stand down. The order says he cannot be moved." Keisha had moved him anyway. She had wheeled his bed through the private wing of St. Miriam's in downtown Atlanta, down silent halls where cleaning machines hummed and the elevator chimed like a prayer bell. She had signed out oxygen she wasn't authorized to take, borrowed a crash cart she had no business borrowing, and pulled strings with a night guard whose baby she'd once rocked through a fever while the father paced and wept in her arms. She'd done all of it because the billionaire on the gurney had looked at her 2 hours earlier with a child's terrified honesty and said, "I don't want to die in white light, with strangers' voices. I want the drum that remembers my name." "Hold on, sir," Keisha whispered. Rain braided down her afro puff and soaked through her blue scrubs. She angled the gurney so that his face aligned with the gallery doors. Her hands shook. She couldn't tell if it was fear or the cold. The emerald-dressed woman was closer now. "Security. This is unlawful." Her heels stabbed the marble like nails. 2 museum guards ran toward the scene, radios crackling. Keisha pressed the release bar and the gurney's brakes clacked off. The old man's eyes were already inside the gallery. The drum, pear-shaped and elegant, wore its goat skin like an ancestor wears the sky. Cowries winked from its cords. It was a piece he had donated, the plaque said, anonymous gift from the Adeyemi family collection, though everyone in Atlanta liked to pretend they didn't know who the anonymous donor was. "We're going in," Keisha told herself, more than him. Then she met the guard's gaze. "He gave this drum to the city. He asked for 5 minutes. That's all." "Ma'am, we can't." "5 minutes," the old man croaked, like a cracked bell still trying to ring. "Let a man touch his home." The heart monitor spiked. The storm rattled the doors. A folktale her grandma used to tell rose to the surface of Keisha's mind the way a fish rises when you tap the river. When an elder stands at the gate of night, do not argue about keys. She pushed. The museum doors sighed open, and the gallery air wrapped them in cool, quiet breath, perfumed with wood and varnish and a faint, lonely lemon polish. Their wheels squeaked over the threshold. Light spread evenly along white walls where masks watched them with solemn eyes. The drum stood under its own halo. Its shadow fell across the floor like a path. "What you're doing is kidnapping," the emerald-dressed woman hissed, entering with 2 guards flanking her. Her hair was sleek as oil, her face perfectly still. "The court order gave me medical power of attorney. You don't know what you're risking, nurse." "Nurse what?" "Walker," Keisha said without turning. "And I know exactly what I'm risking." She did. Her license. Her job. Her freedom. But she also knew the tremor in the old man's fingers as they tried to rise, and how it had matched the tremor in her own when she'd first learned to thread and 4 in nursing school. She knew the parables grandma had given her like coins in a secret pocket. If you refuse a dying man water, your well will forget your face. If you silence a drum, the ground itself will call your name in anger. "Call 911, one guard muttered into his radio, even though everyone knew an ambulance had already been part of this night. Another guard whispered to the woman, "Ms. Caldwell, the cameras are recording." "Good," she snapped. "Let the city see the theft." Keisha halted the gurney at the pedestal. The drum's surface reflected the lights. Close now, its ribs bore tiny, careful cuts, scars of practice, of beating, of travel. The plaque read, Yoruba talking drum, Gangan, c. 1952. Donor, anonymous. The old man's lips formed a hard line. Not anonymous, he whispered. Adeyemi. Pelumi Adeyemi. Keisha felt a catch in her throat. She slipped a glove over her right hand and touched the wooden body near the waist, where it curved inward like a breath held and released. Heat pressed against her fingertips. Memory heat. She thought of her grandma in Savannah, telling stories at dusk on the porch, her voice the same kind of wood, strong, polished by use. The emerald-dressed woman moved closer. Step away from that object, she said. It belongs to the museum. And to him, Keisha said softly. Then she leaned down to the old man. Sir. Mr. Adeyemi. Pelumi. What do you want me to do? He stared at the drum as if it were an open palm. Loosen the cords, he said. On the left side. Third row. Under the cowrie with the crack. Even the guards paused. The storm hushed for a heartbeat. Keisha slid her fingers along the cords. The third row held a shell with a fine fracture like a lightning strike frozen in white. She felt for a knot and found a knot the way you find a note in a song, by leaning with your body. She loosened it. The goat's skin sighed and deepened. The drum was tuning itself, welcoming a voice. Keisha picked up the curved stick resting near the base, a player's stick, left there for demonstrations during school tours, and glanced at the old man. Tell it my name, he breathed. She raised the stick and struck, gentle strong. Ba-da, ba-da, ba-da-da. The sound did not boom. It spoke, clear, liquid, full of throat. The gallery swallowed and replied with a small echo. Masks along the wall seemed to tilt. The chords hummed as if bees lived in them. The rhythm she made without knowing how walked forward like a person you actually recognize in a crowd and are not surprised to see because your bones remember them before your brain does. A sound like a gasp came from the old man. Half sob, half laugh. Eyes that had been dull caught light. He lifted his hand, shaking, and Keisha guided the stick to him. He couldn't grip it, so she wrapped his fingers and held her own around them, and together they struck again. Ba-da, ba-da, ba-da-da-da. A pattern formed, 2 beats, a quick stutter, a long breath. Keisha felt a shiver of something older than Atlanta glide through her. She remembered her grandma telling of drummers who could say a praise nickname so well that kings cried. The drum felt alive, like a warm animal pressing into her palm. The monitors chimed steadier. The rain softened. Enough. Ms. Caldwell snapped, breaking whatever tender spell had grown. She jabbed a finger in the air. Turn that thing off. Back away. Security, remove the nurse. We are leaving. Now. The drum's voice rolled once more, bouncing off high ceilings, and faded. Silence gathered itself again like a shawl. Keisha lowered the stick. We'll go, she said, because she was not here to win a fight. He just wanted to say goodbye. No, the old man whispered, unexpected strength cutting through the syllable. His pupils found Keisha and held her like a rope in a flood. Not goodbye. Listen. He nodded at the drum. On the back. There is a mark. Lower rim. The wood has a mouth. I hid it when I was a boy. Keisha moved around the pedestal. The guards tensed. Ms. Caldwell hissed through her teeth like a kettle. Keisha squinted at the lower rim. At first, she saw only the smooth curve. Then her finger found a tiny ridge. Not a crack. Not an accident. A seam. Her stomach dropped. A seam. The ground rules shifted in a second, the way the air changes when a long summer finally breaks and cool arrives with thunder. Don't you dare, Ms. Caldwell said quietly, her voice all glass. If you damage that, the legal action will end your career. Keisha looked up. Do you know what's inside? Yes, the woman said too quickly. Then, no. He told stories when he was ill. He's confused. Pelumi shook his head. Not confused. Buried. Keisha turned to the guard with the gentler eyes. Do you have a small screwdriver? A coin? Something flat? The man hesitated, then reached into his pocket and offered a pocket knife. For the plaque, he said. Sometimes it slips. He looked toward Ms. Caldwell, guilt already pooling. Ma'am. Give it, Keisha said, because water must be poured while the cup is steady. She took the knife, slid the blade under the seam, and pried, careful, like easing a thorn from a child's heel. The wood resisted, then yielded with a soft click, as if it had been waiting for a password spoken not with a mouth but with a drum. A narrow slice of the drum's body opened. Inside, wrapped in oiled cloth, lay a small bundle no bigger than a fist. The cloth smelled like smoke and rain, and a little like the herbs Keisha used when she soaked her feet after long shifts. Ms. Caldwell's pupils flared. She stepped forward. That's museum property. Then the museum is holding a secret, Keisha replied. And secrets make people sick. She glanced at the old man. He had gone oddly still, as though the very sight of the bundle had lowered his pain. Take it, he said, barely audible. Quickly. Keisha kissed her teeth, a tiny prayer, and slid the bundle out. Her stomach was a drum now, beating a message she could not translate. She unwrapped the oiled cloth with fingers that refused to be perfectly still. Within lay a letter sealed with a curl of red wax pressed by what looked like a cowrie shell, a narrow metal key dark with age, and a photograph speckled by time. The photo showed a teenage boy, Pelumi, but not yet Pelumi, in a silk suit, standing barefoot by a river with a girl beside him. The girl's smile made the river look like a ribbon she had tied to the earth. On the back, someone had written in neat, careful hand, "For the day Atlanta calls me a stranger. For the child who bears my eyes. For the girl who will carry mercy in her hands." Keisha's skin went cold, though sweat slid along her spine. She met Ms. Caldwell's stare and saw there a crack that had not been there before, the first hairline fracture in a mask that had not expected to be hit. Give that to me, Ms. Caldwell said, quieter now, like a person negotiating with the tide. No, Pelumi said, unexpected iron rising in his voice. To her. To the nurse. Caldwell laughed without humor. She has no standing. You have lawyers, Pelumi said. All of them wearing my name as a ring. This one has the only thing that matters when a last wish is called to witness. Clean hands. Thunder grumbled above the glass ceiling and vanished into distance. Somewhere down the corridor, a door opened and closed. The world seemed to balance on one toe. Keisha slipped the letter and key back into the cloth, then into her scrub pocket, feeling their weight like a stone you pick up by accident and realize is a gift. She took the photograph and held it up so the old man could see. His eyes filled. Ebel, he whispered, looking at the girl in the picture with more tenderness than he had shown to the world that knew his corporate signature. Ebel of Makoko. She braided the tides. Ms. Caldwell's face flickered. Her gaze, for a heartbeat, dipped to the pocket where the bundle had disappeared. Then she lifted her chin and stepped toward the gurney. We're done, she said. I'm calling the police. And Nurse Walker, you will hand over. The heart monitor shattered the room with a shrill alarm. Keisha's body moved before her mind had time to speak. She set the photo by the drum, grabbed the bag valve mask, and sealed it over the old man's mouth. Pelumi, stay with me, she said, calm as she could make it. Squeeze, she told the guard, placing his hands where hers could not be. 1 breath, 2 seconds. To the other guard, power on the crash cart. To Ms. Caldwell, step back. Caldwell paled but did not move. He has a DNR, she said. Do not resuscitate. It's signed. Keisha met her eyes over the mask. He revoked it at 9:18 p.m. in the ambulance. He asked for the drum and asked to fight. She flicked the cart on. The machine blinked awake. We honor last wishes tonight. Rhythm is irregular, the gentle-eyed guard reported, voice shaking. Of course it is, Keisha muttered, more to herself than anyone. He just spoke with a drum. She checked the old man's carotid. A thready pulse danced, then stumbled. She thought of her grandma again. When the path darkens, sing your name so your feet remember. Pelumi, Keisha said, bending close. Your name means, surrounded by joy. Come back enough to speak your last thing. Then you can rest. His eyelids fluttered. His lips moved with the weight of 85 years on them. His fingers, thin as broom grass, searched for hers. Keisha gave him her hand. He squeezed. Tell them. He stopped, coughed, swallowed on dust. His voice returned, a papery thread. Tell them the key. Opens the house by the cedar. The one without a number. In the floorboard. Ebel's letter. It names the child. Protect her. Crown her. If they fight, if they call her liar. He coughed again, and blood touched the corner of his mouth like a red bead in white cloth. Drum. The drum is proof. Ms. Caldwell made a small sound, the kind people make when a knife slips and they slice more than onion. This is madness, she whispered. But her eyes would not leave Keisha's pocket. The monitor stuttered. The line dipped, rose, dipped again, as though it too had a story to tell and wanted to tell it twice just in case. Pelumi, Keisha said. You're almost there. Say it clear. His breath loosened like a knot melting. He looked at the photograph resting by the drum. The river there seemed to move. She is my blood, he said, each word pulled from somewhere so deep that even rain could not get there. Keisha, keep her safe. Her. Who? The daughter in the letter? The face in the picture? Keisha blinked tears back and felt the room tilt. The alarm sharpened. The line faltered, went flat for a blink, then skittered back into jagged movement. The guards both swore under their breath. Out beyond the gallery, police sirens began to murmur, then grow, then wail. Time to go, Ms. Caldwell said, panic cracking through. She pointed at the guards. Seize the nurse. Nobody is seizing anybody, the gentler guard snapped, surprising himself with his own spine. He kept squeezing the bag, regular as rain. Not while he's on the edge. Keisha leaned in. Pelumi. Listen. The letter. The key. The house. The cedar. Which city? His eyes rolled toward her with effort. The city where I became harder than I was born to be, he whispered. Where the air tastes like iron. Where the river looks like a road. His lips curved, weak but certain. Lagos. The sirens swelled. The drum, without anyone touching it, hummed a low, bone-deep tone as if some echo remembered the song and wanted to be named again. Ms. Caldwell flinched. Ghost stories, she snapped at the sound. Enough. Thunder answered her, long and slow. Keisha thought of airplane tickets. Of cedar that smelled like cool churches. Of a house without a number. Of a girl called Ebel who braided the tides. Of a child who needed protecting. Of an entire city watching. Pelumi, she said, voice steady. I hear you. He tried to nod. His fingers loosened in hers. For a breath, the line on the monitor marched on with courage. For a breath, the storm forgot to speak. For a breath, even Ms. Caldwell said nothing. Then the museum lights flickered. Once. Twice. Every mask on the wall seemed to blink. The crash cart beeped a warning, and the heart monitor's green turned a thin, sickly color. The line began to flatten, a slow, relentless unrolling, like a spooled ribbon lying out very straight. Stay with me, Keisha said, the order in it both a plea and a stubbornness she inherited from women who worked 3 jobs and still brought soup to neighbors. She glanced at the drum as if it could lend a beat. Stay. The old man's chest rose. Fell. Paused. Somewhere far away, a door banged open. Heavy footsteps pounded, radios argued. Ms. Caldwell's voice pulled thin and sharp. Officer! Arrest that woman. Pelumi, Keisha said, leaning so close her braid brushed his cheek. Say the name. His lips moved. She bent until she felt the word shape itself on his breath, soft as the underside of a river stone. And then. The museum went completely dark. The storm snatched the electricity like a thief grabbing a necklace. The lights cut, the monitors died in one gulping silence, even the emergency exit signs blinked out. Everything collapsed into a rich black where the only sound was rain hard on glass and footsteps turning frantic. In that black, the drum spoke. No hand touched it. No stick struck it. Yet it answered the dark with a single deep syllable that was more vow than sound. A sound that felt like a road seen from the sky and a river carrying a secret and a heartbeat deciding. Ba. The syllable hung, heavy as a key over a lock. Keisha, blind, felt the old man's hand slip from hers. Pelumi, she whispered. The emergency lights flashed on, blood red and slow like a warning heart. In their pulse, the line on the heart monitor, now rebooting, crawled back like a tired traveler. The old man's eyes were closed, his mouth parted, his chest still. Check, said the gentle guard, voice a stone. Keisha pressed her fingers to Pelumi's neck. Her own heart beat so hard it made her fingers shake. For a moment, there was nothing but the drum's last echo, still traveling through the gallery like a story in search of an ear. Then, no, there was nothing. She looked up. The red emergency light washed everything into a scene from a tale told to keep children quiet at night. Ms. Caldwell stared at the gurney, her face a white mask, finally afraid it might crack. Time of. The other guard began, voice breaking. No, Keisha cut in, because saying the thing made it more real than the room could contain. She lowered her head. A tear slid onto Pelumi's knuckles. It glittered there like a blessing that came late but still came. A police officer burst into the gallery, dripping rain, hand near his belt. Everybody step back, he barked. Hands where I can see them. Ms. Caldwell found her voice. Officer, arrest the nurse. She stole museum property and interfered with medical care. I have the order. I have the power of attorney. She kidnapped him. The officer's eyes flicked to Keisha. She stood straight, her scrub pocket heavy with cloth and letter and key. The photograph by the drum trembled in the breath from the HVAC, returning to life one sigh at a time. The emergency lights continued their slow red pulse, as if the building itself had decided to count something important. Nurse, the officer said, measured. I need you to step away and... From under the drum's pedestal came a soft, deliberate click, like a lock turning because someone finally said the word it was made to answer. Every face turned. Even the officer's hand dropped an inch from his belt. Keisha reached for the pedestal, fingers finding a panel she had not noticed, a panel that must have released when the power surged. Her hand slipped under, found a narrow drawer, and drew it out. Inside lay a second photograph, protected in glass, and a folded document with an embossed seal. The photograph showed a little girl around 10, brown skin, fierce eyes, hair pulled into two puffs like small storms. She stood in a school courtyard beside a woman with tired hands and a proud spine. Behind them, carved deep into a wall, the words, "If you see me, you see tomorrow." Ms. Caldwell made a sound like a wire snapping. That wasn't there. Keisha lifted the document. The seal read, State of Georgia. She opened it with care born of night shifts and holy things. At the top, in black letters that did not tremble, it said, Affidavit of Paternity. The signature at the bottom was unmistakable, even under the red pulse, even with 70 years piled on his name. Pelumi Adeyemi. The emergency lights throbbed once more. The officer stopped talking. The guards forgot their radios. Keisha looked from the paper to the photograph to the old man whose chest would not rise again. She knew then that the drum had not only called a name. It had launched a war. And somewhere, in a house by a cedar tree in the city where the river looks like a road, a floorboard was waiting to be lifted before greedy hands found it first. Nurse Walker, the officer said in a voice that had to climb over the situation to find itself, I am going to need you to come with me. Keisha's hand closed around the key in her pocket. Under the glass roof, rain braided and unbraided itself across the night. Her grandma's voice rose up like a lighthouse, when a last wish knocks, open before fear bolts the door. Keisha lifted her eyes to the drum. It said nothing now. It didn't need to. She breathed. She decided. "Officer," she said, her voice even, her hands empty except for what mattered. "Before you do anything, please look at this." He died fulfilling his last wish. Now someone's life depends on me fulfilling the next. She held out the affidavit into the red-lit air. The officer reached, hesitated, reached again. And as his fingers touched the paper, as Ms. Caldwell took a step like a hunter who just saw her prey stumble, as the guards looked at each other like brothers who might choose the same side or different ones, the museum doors at the far end of the gallery swung open once more. A woman stood there, soaked from the storm, holding the hand of a child whose eyes were hurricanes. "Mr. Adeyemi sent for us," the woman said, voice hoarse, face set. "Who are you?" Ms. Caldwell demanded, sudden fear making her sharp enough to cut. The child lifted her chin, looking from the drum to the old man to the paper in the officer's hand. In her gaze was a road and a river and a question that could turn a city. She opened her mouth to speak her name, and the emergency lights blinked out, plunging them all back into the storming dark. The child's voice landed first in the darkness. "My name is Zuri." When the red emergency lights blinked back on, Keisha saw the girl clearly at last. About 10, rain-slick braids ending in cowries that clicked softly when she moved, a small scar shaped like a comma near her left eyebrow, and eyes so steady they made adults look away first. Beside her stood a woman in a soaked denim jacket, gripping Zuri's hand like it was the only solid thing left in the room. The police officer took a breath that tried to be official, then came out human. "Ma'am, how did you get in here?" The woman raised a folded paper sleeve from her pocket. "Security clearance for the museum's side entrance. The night registrar let us in," she said. "Mr. Adeyemi called our pastor at New Vine Church and said to get the girl to the drum and to find Nurse Walker." Her eyes found Keisha, grateful and evaluating in the same glance. "Are you Keisha?" Keisha nodded once. Rain drummed on the glass roof above them, answering without asking. She wiped her hand on her scrub leg and reached out. "I'm Keisha. And you are?" "Naomi Cole," the woman said. "I coordinate outreach at the shelter on Pine Street. Zuri's been in my care for 6 months." The emerald-dressed woman, Ms. Caldwell, stepped forward, her smile a thin blade. "Officer, you are witnessing conspiracy on tape." The nurse removes a dying man from the hospital. The shelter worker shows up with a child she claims is connected to him, and we all pretend a museum instrument is a mailbox. It would be funny if it weren't criminal. "Detain them." Naomi didn't even look at Caldwell. She faced Keisha as if the room had winnowed down to the two of them and the child between. "He called an hour ago. Left a voicemail," he said. "Naomi, take Zuri to the drum. Ask for Nurse Walker. If anyone tries to stop you, tell them the old sea still knows the shore." "I don't know what that means. But we came." Before Keisha could answer, Zuri took 2 steps toward the pedestal like a person stepping toward a familiar sound. The cowries at her braids chimed as if avoiding being too loud in a sacred place. She looked at the drum, breathed, and laid her palm on the skin as lightly as a leaf landing on a river. The gallery air changed. It wasn't wind or electricity. It was something like permission. Even the officer's shoulders eased, as if a weight he didn't know he carried shifted for a second. Caldwell flinched. "Get her away from that object." Zuri didn't move. She kept her palm where it was and turned her head toward Keisha. "He said to say my whole name," she whispered, like someone repeating a secret exactly. "Zuri Ebel." Pelumi's picture, teenage boy by the river with the girl whose smile bent light, sat by the pedestal, its edges still wet with rain. The name slid into Keisha's chest and locked something open. Ebel. The girl by the river. The letter. The officer glanced at Caldwell, then at the affidavit in his hand, then at the child. For a heartbeat, his face held the expression of a man stepping into water without knowing the depth but deciding to anyway. He lowered his voice. "Nobody touches the drum. Nobody touches the child. Not for the next 5 minutes." That's as much room as I can give. Caldwell spun on him. You don't have the authority. It's still raining, the officer said, not looking at her. And I'm the ranking badge in the room. Keisha exhaled slow. Her scrub pocket felt heavier than fabric should. She slid her hand in and pressed the cloth-wrapped bundle, as if to promise it she still remembered. Naomi, Keisha said softly. Who is Zuri to Mr. Adeyemi? Naomi's mouth tightened. We were told she was nobody. Another kid who needed a bed. But he came by the shelter once 6 months ago, unannounced. Sat with the kids. Talked about math in a way that made them laugh. He saw Zuri and couldn't stop watching her. I thought it was creepy for a second. Then he started crying like a boy and excused himself. He sent books later, just for her. I didn't understand. Tonight's call. I still don't understand. Caldwell barked a laugh with no joy in it. He was confused. He was dying. Confused people don't hide keys in drums 60 years earlier, the gentler guard murmured, immediately acting like he hadn't spoken. Keisha moved closer to Naomi and Zuri. Naomi's denim smelled of wet cotton and bus exhaust. Zuri smelled of cocoa butter and rain. Zuri, Keisha asked, did he ever tell you anything himself? The girl shook her head. He told Naomi things. To me, he said, you remind me of a girl who knew how to braid the tides. I didn't know tides have hair. But I liked it. Caldwell's voice snapped the thread of quiet. Officer, we are finished with folklore. The will is on file. The foundation is the beneficiary. This, she flicked her eyes toward the affidavit, is either outdated or fabricated. The hospital will need to be contacted about this nurse. I'll call the probate judge myself. Call whoever you need, Naomi shot back, her voice a steadier fire than Keisha expected. The city is watching, and the city knows when someone rich tries to erase a poor child's face. Caldwell's jaw glittered. Save the speeches for your donors. Keisha didn't bother looking at Caldwell. She looked at Zuri. The scar by the girl's eyebrow tugged at the shape of a memory Keisha couldn't place. Maybe she'd seen that same precise mark on a child once in triage. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was the way all important things arrive, looking like a detail until it isn't. Officer, Keisha said, making her voice practical. I need a quiet space to read this affidavit and to play Mr. Adeyemi's voicemail if Ms. Cole will share it. We should preserve the recording with a timestamp. I also need your body cam to keep rolling. She turned to the gentler guard. Can we move to a side office? Somewhere we can keep sight of the drum. The guard nodded toward a glass-walled conference room off the gallery. In there. Cameras cover it. Caldwell moved to block them. The officer stepped between, palm out. Ma'am. Step aside. Caldwell did, but not like someone obeying. More like someone stepping backward to spring forward with twice the speed. They went into the conference room. The door had no real privacy, glass on 3 sides, but storms often use glass to teach humility. The gentler guard propped it with his foot. The other guard hovered like a question that hadn't found words. Keisha placed the affidavit on the table. The embossed seal caught the red pulse of the emergency light and made it look like it was bleeding. The signature, Pelumi's, sat there as if he had pressed it down just minutes ago. The text named a child born of Ebel A, with a date from a decade earlier in Lagos, and then in sharp clean language asserted paternity and named the right of acknowledgement, education, and inheritance of the child of my blood. There were witness lines, a notary stamp out of Nigeria, an Atlanta attorney's filing receipt, and the strangest sentence at the bottom. See Drum, Inventory 314B, for corroborating markers. Corroborating markers. Naomi read, eyebrows up. What does that even mean? The seam, Keisha said. The hidden compartment. The cowrie seal. The letter. The key. They were markers only he could point to. He made the drum his witness. Naomi slid her phone across the table. The voicemail, she said, tapping the speaker and setting it to max. Saved at 9:11 p.m. Pelumi's voice spilled into the room, thinner than they'd heard it an hour ago, but now spirited by urgency instead of breathlessness. Naomi. Forgive the hour. Bring Zuri to the museum. Ask for Nurse Walker. If you're stopped, say, the old sea still knows the shore. Tell the officer who hears you to take his oath seriously. There is a key in the drum. Give it to the nurse. Tell her to follow Cedar to Lagos. If they take you in, do not fight. The drum will speak when it needs to. And Naomi, keep Zuri's hair in cowries. The drum remembers the sound. Keisha swallowed. Naomi hit stop. The room was silent except for the steady throb of the red light and the storm's angry patience. Keisha drew out the cloth bundle and unwrapped it again, slower now, honoring that everything older than you asks to be unwrapped twice. The key lay there nickel-dark, with a head cut in an unusual oval and a faint letter pressed into the metal. Say 4. The cow-repressed wax seal on the letter stared back like an eye. C.E., Naomi whispered. Cedar. Could be, Keisha said. Or central entrance. Or city estate. Or, I don't know. She sighed. He said, house by the cedar. The one without a number. In Lagos. But this key might open something here that helps us get there. Nothing is leaving this building, Caldwell said loudly from beyond the glass, making sure it got captured by camera and body cam both. She was on the phone now, words clipped and oily. Yes, Judge, I'm in the East Gallery at the High. We have developments. A knock tapped the glass. The gentler guard cracked the door. An elderly man in a wet overcoat stood there, hat in hands, rain running down the creases of his face like it had chosen the most familiar paths. His eyes were the color of river stones and held the patience of someone who had seen several entire plans collapse and several unexpected rescues arrive. Bobba Cola, Naomi said, surprised. You made it. He nodded once. Respectful. I drove, he said, his accent carrying Lagos in its bones. Slowly. This rain is not friendly. His gaze fell to Zuri and softened in a way that made Keisha want to know who he had been when he was young. Little one. Bobba, Zuri said, as if greeting a kind uncle she might also arm wrestle. Caldwell snapped at the sight of him, like a dog spotting a cat trespassing in daylight. Security, do not admit unknown. The guard ignored her and waved the old man in. He's on the approved list for the private wing. Bobba Cola stepped inside the glassroom. He took off his hat. I am Michael Caldwell, driver to Mr. Adeyemi for 18 years, he said simply. Then to Keisha, he told me your name on my way out of the hospital. Find Nurse Walker, he said. Give her the cedar box if the drum speaks. He lifted a small wooden box wrapped in a plastic grocery bag from under his coat and set it on the table. Even under cheap plastic, it smelled like a forest remembering rain. The grain ran like river maps. A small brass slot showed on the front. Its shape matched the oval head of the key exactly. For a second, nobody moved. Outside the glass, Caldwell's voice rose with the tense brightness of someone reaching for a rope in the dark. The officer hovered at the door. The guard's body cam stared like a square, unblinking eye. Keisha, Naomi said. Open it. Keisha slid the key into the slot. It refused for a heartbeat, the polite refusal of a door that wants to know if you really mean to come in, then accepted and turned with a soft click like a small truth telling itself out loud. Inside, carefully stacked, lay a passport, a thin ledger bound in black cloth, a folded letter with Keisha's name in firm handwriting on the outside, and an airline envelope. Keisha's fingers went first to the envelope because the crisis logic she'd learned in emergency rooms insisted on triage even for paper. Stabilize the part running out of time. She pulled out 2 e-tickets printed on heavy paper. ATL Los. Hartsfield Jackson to Murtala Muhammad. Departure. 12:55 a.m. Passengers. Keisha Walker / Zuri. The clock on the conference room wall read 11:07 p.m. Naomi's hand flew to her mouth. The gentler guard said something that sounded like a prayer and a curse at the same time. The officer stared at the tickets, at Zuri, at Keisha. "He booked you on the midnight run," he muttered, incredulous respect peeking through. Keisha felt her heartbeat shift into the clean rhythm of a plan. She slid one ticket back into the envelope and put the envelope into the pocket of her scrub top. The paper made a soft show of being heavier than it was. Then she lifted the folded letter with her name. "Keisha," it began in square, steady hand. "Forgive my boldness. You are young, but you are a keeper. When men break oaths, keepers hold the pieces and carry them to the child. The ledger marks debts I owe and debts owed to me. In Lagos there is a house with cedar shutters and no number. This key opens the floor that hid what the will could not. Naomi will see Zuri to you. Kola will get you through the first gate. Trust the drum and any person who does not look away from it. If they corner you, remember, a drum without skin is just wood, but with skin it speaks. Some people are only wood until courage stretches over them. Forgive me for the years of silence. Protect the girl. Crown her. P.A." Keisha pressed the letter's edge to her palm. Soft, dangerous. She wanted to sit down and stand up at the same time. Boba Cola lifted the black ledger from the box. "He made me write every number in here twice," he said, a ghost of amusement in his voice. He always said, "Cola, if they tell you you're greedier than your ledger, show them the ledger." Caldwell's shoes clicked toward the glass room. She pointed at the officer through the pane, phone pressed to her ear. "Judge says hold them. No one leaves the state. The child goes into state custody pending an emergency hearing. The nurse is to be detained for questioning. Officer, do your job." Naomi straightened, fury quiet and clean. "You're going to take her from me in the middle of a storm because a dying man loved a child you didn't expect him to?" She shook her head. "No." The officer's jaw worked. He looked at the affidavit, at the passport in the cedar box, Nigerian, in Zuri's name, issue date last week, at the tickets, at the body cam light blinking, at the storm that kept a steady hand on the city. Law is a set of lines. Conscience is the space between them. He stood in that space like a man who had learned to balance late. "I can't let you run," he said finally, eyes on Keisha. "Not after a judge said hold. Not without proof you're safer moving than staying." As if the universe had been waiting for that line, the museum's main doors opened again and 4 men in black raincoats entered, too quickly to be tourists and too silent to be cops. 2 peeled off toward the corridors, as if they knew the map by heart. The other 2 walked straight and smooth, hands empty, eyes wrong. The gentler guard stiffened. "We're closed," he called. "You need to leave." They did not. Caldwell didn't look surprised. She did look careful. "They're private security," she said, voice too casual. "From the Foundation. Here to ensure property is not removed." "Private security doesn't carry that kind of walk," Bobacola said under his breath. "Those are men who don't ask questions because they cannot carry answers." The officer stepped into the gallery, one palm out, the other near his radio. "Gentlemen, you'll turn around and wait outside." One of the men smiled without teeth. "We're just here for the drum." "Which is museum property," Caldwell added smoothly. "You see. We all agree." Naomi slid closer to Zuri, bringing the child behind her hip. Keisha folded the cedar box closed and tucked it under her arm like a baby you don't announce. The ledger went into Naomi's tote as if paper could learn to hide. Bobacola moved his old body between the glass door and the men's line of sight with the ease of someone who learned to be a wall before he learned to be a driver. The men in black split around a display case like a river around a rock. The officer raised his voice. "Stop. Hands up. Show me ID." They didn't raise hands. They didn't show ID. They did what wolves do when you ask for their name. The first one reached for the drum. The drum did not like him. It thrummed under his palm with a sound like warning, like a mother murmuring no when a child reaches toward fire. The man snatched his hand back as if stung. His eyes cut to Caldwell. Caldwell's mask slipped for an instant. Not fear, exactly. Irritation. As if a prop refused a cue. "Officer," Keisha said, "calm as you speak to a child you intend to keep calm with you. Your judge can have us in front of her by sunrise if that is what the law needs. But if we stay in this building for the next 10 minutes, I do not think everyone in this room will be safe." She tipped her chin at the men in black. "Make the call you'd want someone to make if your own child was standing behind glass." The officer's radio crackled. "Unit 12, power grids unstable. If you need backup, ask now. The storm's routing unit south." He looked at Zuri. Storm red light slid across her small face like a wound that hadn't decided to heal yet. The cowries in her braids clicked once. "Move," he said to the gentler guard without raising his voice. "Get them to the service exit. I'll stall. You," he pointed at the other guard. "Pull the footage and email it to my precinct and your supervisor. Naomi Cole and Nurse Walker will be at Hartsfield by midnight. If they're not on a plane, I'll bring them back myself. If they are, I'll testify about why." Caldwell stepped forward, phone still to her ear. "You will lose your badge." "Then make sure the footage shows why," he said, eyes steady on hers. "The city can decide if I should carry one." The gentler guard moved. Baba Cola moved. Naomi grabbed Zuri's hand. Keisha tucked the cedar box tighter, the key in her scrub pocket tapping her thigh like a countdown. They slid out the side of the glass room. The gallery had 3 cameras and now 2 wolves, plus one lawyer who mistook certainty for truth. The officer met the men halfway, body language loud with authority, voice quiet with warning. "Folks, we're not doing this in a museum full of cameras and priceless history. You can wait outside like professionals, or you can explain to my captain why you're adding charges to your night." The men stalled. Wolves do the math too. One of them lifted a hand, palm up, as if to say, "We are patient." It was not a comforting hand. The gentler guard led them down a staff corridor. Their shoes squeaked on the wet floor. Zuri's small hand burned in Keisha's. Naomi whispered as they hurried. "What about the judge's order?" "We didn't hear it," Baba Cola replied without breaking stride. "Storm is loud. Our ears are small." An elevator dinged like a nervous laugh. The gentler guard jabbed the button for B. The doors closed with the sigh of a building making up its mind. The car moved. Keisha finally remembered to breathe. "What if we're wrong?" she asked no one and everyone. "What if the cedar house is a dead end? What if there's nothing in the floor?" "Then we will know we chose courage and not convenience," Baba Cola said. "And that is not nothing." The basement opened its mouth to them. Concrete, a strip of fluorescent light stuttering, the smell of detergent and damp cardboard. The service exit stood at the end, a lit exit sign buzzing like a fly. The guard pushed the bar. Night slammed their faces with rain and wind and the smell of wet magnolia. They hurried under the loading dock overhang. Baba Cola's old Toyota idled there like a faithful dog, windshield wipers doing their best. "Take my car," the guard said. "Yours will get stopped on the street. Mine is in the system." He dug in his pocket and pressed keys into Keisha's hand. Blue Civic. Spot B6. Left after the ramp, then 2 rights. Keisha pressed his hand without words. He looked startled, then braver, in the way men look when a room finally trusts them to be the good person their mother thought they were. "Go," he said. They ran. Rain slapped their scrubs and denim and cowries, pasted their hair to their heads and their clothes to their backs, made every step its own small argument. They dashed up the ramp. B6 appeared like a miracle that happened to be made in Japan. Keisha hit unlock, Naomi bundled Zuri into the back, Baba Cola folded himself in slow whooshing pieces into the passenger seat, and Keisha slid behind the wheel. For a half-second she fought the wild idea that she shouldn't drive, that she was 24 and small and this was bigger than her. Then her foot found the pedal, her hands found the wheel, her grandma's voice found her. "Baby, when it's time to carry the water, you don't ask the jug if it feels heavy. You just carry." They peeled out into the rain. Downtown Atlanta at 11:19 p.m. during a storm is a lesson in surprises. Lights that go out for a block and blaze in the next, streets that flood at the knees and then suddenly are clear, drivers who forget the difference between bravery and recklessness. Keisha chose the lanes that looked like they remembered mercy. Bob Cola watched the mirrors like he was reading a book only he could read. Naomi stroked Zuri's wet braids. Zuri sat too still, then not still at all, then still again. "My hair is cold," she said after a minute, voice small and factual. "We'll find a towel at the airport," Naomi promised. Keisha took a left. The Civic answered with a grateful hum. She pushed the car as far as felt honest. The airport signs appeared like lighthouses with arrows. She took the one that promised international, because sometimes you have to trust a sign that big just because it is big. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She let it buzz. It buzzed again. She tapped speaker and set it on the console. Static, then a man's voice thick with Lagos and old anger. "Nurse Walker. If you want the child to live, do not board. Bring the key to Terminal E, departures level, column 17. You have 18 minutes. Naomi's hand found Zuri's shoulder. Zuri gripped Naomi's fingers and did not let her fear show in her face, which is one of the saddest skills children learn. "Who is this?" Keisha asked, her voice steady because the car needed it. "Bring the key," the voice repeated, "or the house with cedar shutters burns before dawn." The line went dead. For a second the car held only the sound of rain and the wipers working hard at hope. Naomi's eyes found Keisha's in the rearview mirror. "If we stop, we play their game. If we don't, we risk the house." "They already found us," Keisha said. "They'll be at the terminal." "Then don't meet them at the terminal," Bob Cola said, a slow smile cutting a thin road through his beard. "Meet them where their shoes slide." Keisha frowned. "Meaning?" "Parking garage," he said. "Lower, where the rain pools and the cameras are your friend and their coats get heavy." Zuri spoke for the first time since the call. He said, "The old sea still knows the shore. Maybe the airport is the sea. Maybe we just have to touch the shore and run." "Baby," Naomi whispered, "you are a poet." "No," Zuri said simply. "I just listen." They swung into the garage. Keisha took them down one level, then another, each turn a tight question. The place smelled like rubber and wet coins. A family unloaded suitcases 2 rows over. A man slept in an SUV with the engine on, mouth open. Time did the thing it does when it matters. Became both loud and slippery. Keisha eased into a slot beside a concrete pillar. She cut the engine. They listened to their own breathing like a metronome while the storm played lead. She opened the cedar box on her lap. The ledger blinked up. The passport for Zuri, new, photo stern because official pictures always tell children to be older than they are. The letter from Pelumi. The tickets. "Naomi," Keisha said, "take the ledger, the passport, and a ticket. If something happens to me, you get on that plane." "No," Naomi said without hesitation. "We stick." "Listen," Keisha insisted, tone sharpening like a blade you hate to sharpen but must. "I am the one with a license on the line and a grandmother who will forgive me if I do the right kind of wrong. You are the shelter director who keeps kids alive with donated soup and a spreadsheet. If someone has to run a straight line with a child through TSA, it needs to be you. Take the passport. Now." She pressed the items into Naomi's hands. Naomi pressed them back. Keisha pressed harder. "Please." Naomi swallowed and nodded, but not because she agreed. Because she saw the angle and chose it. "What about the key?" Zuri asked, eyes on the oval of metal like it was a small animal that might bite or bless. Keisha tucked it under her scrub collar, let it sit warm against her skin where necklaces live and secrets learn to be comfortable. "Near the heart," she said. "Old rule." She looked at Bob Cola. "You stay with them. If I'm late by 5 minutes, you take them through security." "You are not late," he said, as if late were a word a person could choose not to be. Keisha got out of the car into the rain and the garage's echo. She breathed until breathing felt like something she could do without thinking. She left the cedar box under the seat. She took the envelope with the second ticket and slid it into her back pocket. She stepped into the aisle with her hands visible and no sudden movements, because sometimes the only thing that keeps you from becoming a headline is refusing to give the world a picture it can misunderstand. She walked toward the pillar marked 17. Rain bled into the garage in gusts, making the concrete shine. A man leaned against the pillar, hat low. Another stood to the side, scanning, not watching her but not watching her. Men who do the wrong job too long forget how to pretend to be anything else. Key, the hat said. Keisha stopped 10 feet away. Show me you can even count to 3 before you ask me for a number. She kept her voice flat, not brave, not scared, the tone nurses use when a patient needs to hear yes but also needs to do their part. 1. You call and threaten a child and a house. 2. You meet a nurse under a camera. 3. You think I don't know every camera in this lane is sending this right now to at least 2 drives. She nodded to the lens overhead. She had no idea if that was true. She said it like it was a number written on a whiteboard. Hat didn't look up. The other man did. A small, beautiful slice of doubt cut his heart. The house burns if we leave, Hat said. And if you go, the girl never finds it anyway. Old men promise many things. Old men also book tickets while dying and hide keys when they are 16, Keisha said. He earned more belief than you have earned speech. Hat stepped off the pillar. He was shorter than the voice had sounded. That happens. Some people use echo as armor. The key, he repeated, and moved closer. Keisha lifted her hands. Slow. Letting the keychain under her collar glint and hide. Glint and hide. You show me a picture of the house you say you can burn, she said. If you can't, you're lying. If you can, you just gave me proof for the judge in 2 hours. Hat smiled. He had 3 gold teeth and one that wanted to be. You talk like school, he said. But school can't keep you. He lunged. Keisha stepped sideways, fast and small, the way you move a patient away from a falling 4-pole. Her palm caught his wrist, turned it, pushed with the leverage that comes from carrying bodies heavier than your own for too many shifts. Hat hissed. The other man moved. A voice like a whistle cut the air. Ma. It wasn't Naomi or Zuri calling her mother. It wasn't anyone who should have called anyone that. It wasn't even in the right direction. It came from behind Keisha, toward the car. She turned. A third man she hadn't seen had reached the Civic. He had Naomi by the forearm, Zuri by the elbow. He wasn't hurting them yet. He was moving them. That is sometimes worse. Keisha's body tried to become 2 bodies and failed. Let her go, she said, and it came out wrong, too loud, too thin. Hat saw the thinness and laughed the small laugh of men who think they have one because someone noticed they are cruel. He reached for her collar. And Zuri did something nobody planned. She slipped her arm sideways, a quick bird, and clapped her cowrie-tipped braids together sharply. The sound cracked like a stick. In the museum, the drum had answered hands. In the garage, with concrete for walls and rain for a roof, the cowries answered the drum's memory. A sound rolled through the space, low, familiar, not exactly heard with ears. The car's alarm system hiccuped and went silent. The gold-toothed man's hand shook like a leaf remembering wind. The cameras above blinked once, then steadied, their recording light a tiny stubborn star. Keisha used the heartbeat Zuri bought. She drove her knee up, sharp, into Hat's thigh, then shoved his shoulder with both hands. He stumbled. She spun to the man with Naomi and Zuri. She didn't have to yank. Naomi had already twisted her wrist out of his grip with the fury of a mother who has had to pretend to be a mother too many times for children who weren't hers. The man reached for Zuri again. Zuri ducked under his arm, small and exact. He grabbed for air. The third man went for Keisha, and that's when a horn blared so close it became pain. A shuttle bus came out of nowhere, airport staff drop-off, empty of passengers, highlights cutting rain into sheets. The driver hit brakes and horn and flung open the folding doors in one motion. "Hey!" he shouted, voice carrying years of breaking up fights in parking lots. "Leave those women alone." Sometimes a small, loud interruption loosens an entire scene. The men looked at the bus, at the driver, at the camera above, at the phone in Naomi's raised hand now streaming video to nowhere and everywhere. Hat did the new math, the kind with more eyes and less shadow. "This is not finished," he said, like a line from a bad play. "Math is," Keisha said. "We're late." They backed away, small fast steps that turned into bigger ones, then became that particular run men use when they want to pretend they are walking. The bus driver stared, then looked at Keisha, then at Zuri. "You folks need a ride to the terminal?" "Yes," Naomi said, breathless and composed in the same sentence. "Please." They piled into the warm, plastic-smelling bus. The driver shut the doors. The bus lurched. Keisha clutched the pole and didn't let go until the bus pulled into the drop-off at International. "Good luck," the driver said. He meant more than planes. Inside the terminal, everything was too bright and too clean for the story on their clothes. Travelers argued with counters. A couple laughed like they promised not to mention the fight later. TSA lines curled like tired snakes. Naomi checked the time. 12:03 a.m. 52 minutes, she said. "We can make it if no one stops us." "Someone will," Cola said. "But maybe not the ones you think." They slid into the line. The ticket agent looked at Zuri, at the water dripping from their hems, at Keisha's scrub collar tucked around a necklace that didn't usually live there, and printed boarding passes without asking for more than the basics. Maybe she saw stories all day and learned when to let one pass through. When they reached the TSA checkpoint, a supervisor stepped forward, as if he had been waiting for their faces. Caldwell would have called someone. The wolves would have texted. "You can buy speed if you have the right kind of money and the wrong kind of heart." "Ma'am," the supervisor said, not unkindly, "you've been flagged for additional screening." Keisha smiled like a nurse brings a thermometer, not a fight. "Of course," she said. "Flag me all you need. But the child goes through with her guardian first." "Actually," he began. Behind him, a woman in a navy blazer stepped up, badge at her hip, hair in tight coils, eyes that had learned to see the difference between a panic and a performance. She took them in with a glance that blessed and measured. "Problem?" she asked the supervisor. "Judge's office sent an advisory on a child," he said, low. "We're supposed to hold until local law arrives." The woman's eyes landed on Zuri's braids, on the cowries, on the way the child stood without leaning on anyone. Then on Keisha's scrub collar, wet with rain and responsibility. Then on Naomi's hands, steady despite the shake under the skin. Then on Cola's face, which carried 3 continents and a bus ride. She looked at the supervisor. "Advisories are not warrants," she said. "And storms make judges nervous. Process them. If law arrives with paper, we can have a conversation on the other side of the magnetometer." The supervisor hesitated. The woman didn't. "Now," she said quietly, which is sometimes the loudest way to say it. They moved. Shoes off. Belts in bins. Passport open. Zuri giggled once at the machine that puffed air like a rude giant, then remembered she was supposed to be brave and stopped. They gathered their things. "Ma'am," the navy blazer woman said to Keisha as she handed back the boarding passes, "sometimes the city chooses who we are by who we let through." Keisha met her eyes. "And sometimes by who we stop," she answered. The woman nodded. "Run kindly." They ran. Gate E14 blinked its promise. Boarding in 12 minutes. People clustered like small camps. A baby cried as if announcing their future in politics. The rain pressed both palms against the floor-to-ceiling glass like a child trying to look in. Naomi squeezed Keisha's hand. "If we make it to Lagos," she said, "and that floorboard is empty, you know we just changed our lives for a story." "If the floorboard is empty," Keisha said, "we still carry the story." And stories have fed more people than some jobs I could mention. Boba-Cola sank into a chair like a man finishing prayer. Zuri leaned against Keisha's leg, just enough to borrow a bit of her steadiness. The boarding agent lifted the microphone. We will begin pre-boarding for flight. Keisha's phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She hit speaker because secrets hated her tonight and she refused to be the only one to hold them. A woman's voice, smoother than Caldwell's and older than Naomi's, poured out. Keisha Walker, it said, you are carrying something that does not belong to you. Keisha stared at the speaker holes like they were a face. Get in line, she said. So many people think so tonight, we might need a raffle. You have the key, the voice continued. But you don't have the name. The name of what? Naomi asked, too quiet for the phone to catch, loud enough for the fear to hear. The name he whispered while the lights were out, the voice said. It sounded pleased to know something, and cruelty loves being pleased. Without that, Lagos will spit you out. Keisha felt the dark of the museum hug her briefly in memory. The drum, the breath, the mouth forming a word she couldn't hear. Who are you? She asked. Someone who knew him when the drum was still allowed to speak past a museum glass, the voice said. Someone who has been waiting for him to be as weak as he became tonight. A pause, then a smile she could hear. And someone who knows the house with cedar shutters already burned last week. Zuri's fingers crushed Keisha's. The boarding door chimed. Now pre-boarding for passengers with small children. Keisha looked at Naomi. Naomi looked at Keisha. The world waited, the kind of waiting that isn't patient. Prove it, Keisha said into the phone, keeping her voice even enough to drive on. Send a picture of the house today. A photo pinged her screen. Cedar shutters, or what they had been, blackened. A floor seen through a hole in what had been a room. Smoke still muscling the night. Naomi's breath hitched. The voice returned, soft as a knife. Without the name he whispered, you will not find the second place. And by the time you think to look down instead of up, the ledger will be redistributed. Keisha stared at the image until her eyes watered and wouldn't clear. And then Zuri did the smallest thing that might have been the biggest. She hummed. Just a note. Barely there. A child's throat remembering a drum not because she had ever learned it, but because the drum had learned her. The tune curled like steam and settled like a hand on a shoulder. Boba-Cola's head snapped up. His eyes widened with a young man's surprise wearing an old man's face. What? Keisha asked. He swallowed. She is humming the opening of a praise name my mother used to sing to the river, he said. Not a person's name. A place's. What place? Naomi pressed. His voice turned reverent. Not a house. A dock. The phone voice laughed, easy and sure. You'll never. Zuri kept humming, a little louder now, the note bending into another, then another, the cowries in her hair clicking softly in time. Boba-Cola finished the line aloud without meaning to. Where the water keeps secrets because the city won't let it keep anything else. He looked at Keisha with a fire that turned fear into a tool instead of a master. The name he whispered, he said, was not a person. It was a dock no longer on any tour. The door is not in the cedar house. The door is in the water. The boarding agent called final pre-board. Gate chatter rose. The phone voice went quiet for the first time, the way a snake goes quiet when it hears thunder it didn't expect. Keisha closed her hand around Zuri's small, humming shoulder. Rain clawed at the glass like it wanted in. Planes nosed the dark like whales. We're not flying to a house, she said, decision dropping inside her like a stone into a deep well. We're flying to a dock. Caldwell's men could burn any number they had found. But a place the city pretended not to have? Sometimes the only way to lose something like that is to stop singing it. Passengers with children, please approach. Keisha stepped forward, tickets in hand, while the unknown voice on the phone hissed, the way someone hisses when a story refuses to end where they planned. Ms. Walker, the voice said, last try, last trick, sugar on steel. The dock is dangerous. The water is deep. Think of your license. Think of your life. Keisha ended the call. She looked down at Zuri. If we do this, she said, we do it together. You get a say. Zuri's chin lifted the way Pelumi's had when he refused to let the nurse call his goodbye a goodbye. We go, she said. And if the water talks, we listen. The agent scanned their passes. The beeps were small, ordinary, kind. They walked down the jet bridge into a narrow silver throat leading to a belly full of strangers and air that smelt like old coffee and new hope. Behind them, somewhere in a city that loved both money and music, a drum sat in the dark, keeping time for a dock that no longer had a name on any map. And that was exactly the point. At 12:47 a.m., 8 minutes before departure, while the plane's engine woke like a lion deciding to stretch or hunt, 3 men in black raincoats reached gate E14 and found nothing but wet footprints and a flight number on a screen turning from white to blue. They were still looking at the screen when the text hit Caldwell's phone. Affidavit copied. Footage secured. Officer uncooperative. Nurse and child airborne. Confirm follow in Lagos? Caldwell typed back with thumbs that never trembled. Yes. And remind them, the drum is not our only witness. She slid the phone into her clutch and watched the rain, her reflection sharp in the glass, as if a person could be two true things at once. High above, pressing through storm into clean air, Keisha sat between Naomi and Zuri and kept her hand on the place where the key warmed her skin. Boba Cola nodded off, finally, lips moving as if reciting prayers and directions at the same time. The flight attendant dimmed the lights. The city fell away, small lights winking like an audience that hadn't decided whether to clap or warn. Zuri leaned into Keisha's side and spoke in a voice almost not there. Ms. Keisha. Yes, baby. What if the doc doesn't remember? Keisha stared into the dark, searching for a word with enough truth in it not to break when it hit the child's ear. She found Grandma's answer, the one given on front porches and hospital nights. Then we make it remember, she said. Long after, when most of the plane finally slept the sleep it hoped the future would honor, the engine's low song spread steady as a drumbeat no fist could stop. And 4 seats behind, a man who had boarded late and never took off his raincoat lifted his face just enough for the aisle light to sketch the edge of a smile that wasn't kind at all. He reached into his pocket, touched a small, flat device, and clicked it once, silent to ears, eager to cameras. The light on Keisha's seatback screen flickered, then steadied. The man closed his eyes as if to rest. He did not rest. They were not alone. The plane sliced through the night like a secret told in confidence. The hum of engines filled every silence that fear tried to occupy. Keisha sat rigid in her seat, her pulse matching the low throb beneath her feet. Naomi had dozed off, her head tilted toward the window, lips moving as though she were still arguing with fate in her sleep. Boba Cola snored softly beside her, the rhythm of his breath like the backbeat of a slow drum. But Keisha didn't close her eyes. She couldn't. Zuri lay half asleep with her head in Keisha's lap, cowries glinting faintly in the dim cabin light. Each tiny shell clicked when the plane jolted through turbulence, and Keisha found herself counting the sounds like prayer beads. Somewhere behind them, the man in the raincoat hadn't moved. She could see the faint shape of him in the reflection of the window, a still figure, hood low, his face a shadow. The flight attendant passed, checking belts, smiling the professional smile of someone trained to spot trouble without naming it. She leaned toward Keisha. Ma'am, are you all right? Keisha nodded. Just a little nervous flyer. The attendant smiled, whispered something about turbulence, and moved on. Zuri stirred. Ms. Keisha. Yes, baby. The man too rose back. He's watching us. Keisha's stomach tightened. How do you know? Zuri blinked sleepily. The cowries told me. They said he smells like wet wood and fire. Keisha's heart skipped. The girl's words were too vivid, too close to the memory of the burned cedar shutters in that photograph. She didn't dismiss her. She'd learned never to. Okay, she said quietly. Then we listen to them. Zuri nodded solemnly and went back to her cowries, twisting one strand so that the shells clacked softly in rhythm. Keisha looked toward Baba Kola, who was now awake, pretending not to be. He opened one eye. You see him too? She nodded slightly. Row 28. He sighed. He is not sleeping. Men who mean no harm do not keep both feet flat on the floor on a 12-hour flight. Keisha almost smiled despite herself. Do we tell the crew? She whispered. Not yet, he said. If he is who I think he is, crew cannot help. Only heir can. What does that mean? He gave a small shrug. Wait until he forgets that he is being watched. Then we will make him choose whether he wants to land with us or without his plans. Hours slid by like lazy rivers. When the cabin lights dimmed completely, Keisha finally closed her eyes, but not to sleep. Her mind wandered back to Pelumi's face, the last breath, the drum's final sound that had rolled through the gallery. She could still hear it sometimes, faint under the roar of the engines. Bah. Not a note. A promise. And with every repetition in her mind, she remembered the whisper she couldn't decipher, the name he'd formed but never spoke. The one the woman on the phone claimed to know. The dock where the water keeps secrets. She opened her eyes. Outside, the Atlantic stretched infinite and black. Zuri mumbled in her sleep. He said don't forget the tide's left hand. Keisha froze. What did you say, sweetheart? But Zuri was already somewhere else, lost in a child's dream that sounded too much like a message. Morning came like forgiveness, slow, golden, and not complete. Lagos spread beneath them, dense and restless, glittering where water caught the sun. The landing gear groaned, the cabin buzzed alive, and everyone began the ritual of arrival. Stretching, collecting, pretending they hadn't been afraid somewhere over the ocean. As the plane taxied, Keisha turned to Kola. Where do we start? He smiled faintly. With the water. Always with the water. Outside the terminal, the heat hit like a confession. Lagos was awake. Horns, vendors, buses painted in yellow and blue, people talking like they were in a hurry to outspeak time. Kola hailed a battered taxi with one wave. The driver, a wiry man in a faded Arsenal jersey, smiled wide. Ah, Baba Kola. You still day walker. I no fit stop yet tund, Kola replied, slipping into Yoruba. I get one small errand way past my years. Tund looked at Keisha, Naomi, and Zuri, curious. Na oyinbo nurse go day lead you now? Kola chuckled. No story you know go believe. They climbed in. The car smelled of petrol, sweat, and pepper soup. Where we day go? Tund asked. Kola looked at Keisha. You remember what I said, the dock that keeps secrets? Yes. Makoko, he said. Under the third mainland bridge. That is where Pelumi grew from boy to man. If the drum remembers anything, it will start there. Naomi frowned. You mean the floating slum? The place on water. Kola nodded. Yes. The dock is there. And maybe what he hid. As the taxi merged into the chaos of traffic, Zuri pressed her face to the window. The lagoon shimmered between gaps of concrete and exhaust, the houses on stilts like ghosts trying not to sink. This place is alive, Keisha murmured. It is, Kola said. Alive enough to remember those who left it. They reached Makoko just after noon. The air tasted of salt, smoke, and wood. Narrow boats glided between houses. Children paddled with makeshift oars, laughing like it was a game rather than survival. Kola led them down a walkway of uneven planks. Pelumi's mother sold fish here. The girl, Ebel, the one in the photo, was from across the water. Her people knew the stories that come from the tide's left hand. The tide's left hand, Keisha whispered, remembering Zuri's sleep talk. She said that on the plane. Kola stopped. Then she remembers more than she should. They reached a small dock half submerged in murky water. On its post, nearly invisible under moss, a carving read, EA, the same initials from the photograph. Naomi gasped. Ebel A. Pelumi wasn't lying. Kola crouched, tracing the carving. He called this place the left hand of the tide. Because when the flood comes, this dock is the first to sink and the last to rise. Zuri knelt beside him, her reflection broken in the water. It's waiting. Keisha looked around. For what? Zuri pointed. For the drum. Keisha frowned. The drums in Atlanta. Zuri shook her head. No. The water heard it. When the drum spoke, the water learned its song. Kola straightened slowly, his knees popping. Then maybe the water will give something back. He pulled a small, rust-stained crowbar from his bag and wedged it into the dock's edge. The wood resisted, groaned, then split open with a sigh. Beneath the plank lay a metal box, corroded but intact. Naomi gasped. After all these years. Kola pried it out and set it on the dock. The box had the same cowrie seal symbol as the drum. Keisha's pulse thundered. She fished the key from under her collar. The oval fit perfectly into the keyhole. It turned. Inside lay three things. A second ledger, thinner but older. A small wooden carving of a pregnant woman holding a drum. And a folded sheet of parchment, edges frayed, ink faded but legible. Keisha opened it carefully. It was a birth certificate. Child: Zuri Ebel Adeyemi. Mother: Ebel Akand. Father: Pelumi Adeyemi. Witness: Michael Caldwell. Kola's eyes filled. He made me sign that day. Said if the world ever doubted her, my name should remind it. Naomi covered her mouth. So, she's truly his blood. Keisha looked at Zuri. The girl was staring at the certificate without surprise, as though the paper merely caught up with what her heart already knew. Zuri whispered. The drum told me I was somebody. Kola placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. You are. But before the moment could breathe, a sound cut through the thick air, the whine of a boat engine too close, too fast. Keisha turned. A black motorboat was slicing toward them, men in dark shirts at the bow. Caldwell's reach had stretched across an ocean. Naomi's voice cracked. How did they find us this fast? Because, Kola said grimly, someone on that plane never meant to arrive quietly. They backed away from the edge as the boat skidded to a stop against the dock. The lead man jumped out first, tall, raincoat still clinging to his frame, face half hidden by sunglasses despite the cloudy sky. Ms. Walker, he said, his accent sharp as broken glass. We meet again. Keisha's hand went instinctively to Zuri's shoulder. You shouldn't be here, she said. He smiled. Neither should he have been in that museum. Yet here we are, fulfilling wishes. He lifted a small pistol, casual as a handshake. Give me the box. And the child. Naomi stepped forward. Over my dead body. That can be arranged, he said, cocking the gun. Before he could aim, Zuri stood tall, lifting her chin. You're not listening, she said softly. The man frowned. To what? The drum, she whispered. Then, with a sharp motion, she slammed the wooden carving of the pregnant woman against the dock. It split open. Inside it was hollow, and it sang. A sound, deep and ancient, burst out, rolling through the air like thunder trapped in a bottle finally freed. The water around the dock began to ripple violently, the waves hitting the boat with unnatural rhythm. Beada, beada, beadada. The men panicked. One lost his footing and fell into the lagoon. Another scrambled to pull him up. The sound grew louder, the air vibrating with invisible hands. Fish leapt in arcs of silver. Birds screamed overhead. Keisha felt her heartbeat sync with the rhythm, the same pattern she'd played with Pelumi in the museum. The raincoat man shouted something she couldn't hear over the roar. The gun fired once, missed, and clattered into the water. Then the carving's song died as suddenly as it had begun. Silence fell like a curtain. The men's boat spun half-submerged, engine coughing. The lagoon went still again. The man in the raincoat glared at them, drenched, furious. This isn't over. Maybe not, Keisha said, her voice shaking but steady enough to carry. But right now, you've lost the rhythm. He cursed and dove into the boat. The engine sputtered back to life, and they retreated into the fog of Makoko's waterways. For a long moment, none of them spoke. Only the water lapped gently, as though calming itself. Naomi finally broke the silence. What was that? Kola smiled faintly, eyes on Zuri. A reminder that drums don't forget their own. Keisha knelt beside the girl. Zuri, how did you know to do that? Zuri shrugged, as if it were obvious. The carving was humming. It wanted to finish its song. Keisha exhaled, overwhelmed. And what song was that? The one that wakes the tide's left hand, Zuri said simply. But it's not done yet. Kola looked up, frowning. Not done. She shook her head. The doc gave us her name. But it said there's still one more thing he hid. Where the water meets the cedar. Naomi blinked. That could mean the mouth of the river, Kola finished. Where the lagoon empties to the sea. Keisha stood, her clothes soaked from the splash. Then that's where we go next. And as thunder rolled distantly over Lagos, the old dock, Ebble's dock, gave one last soft creak, as if nodding its approval. But none of them noticed the small red light blinking from the broken carving before the waves swallowed it whole. Far away, in a dark office lit only by monitors, a figure in an emerald dress smiled coldly at the screen showing a live GPS feed. Run all you want, Nurse Walker, Ms. Caldwell murmured. Even the tides report to me. The morning air in Lagos carried the smell of salt, diesel, and something older, something that seemed to remember every promise ever whispered to it. The city was waking up as Keisha, Naomi, Zuri, and Baba Kola boarded a wooden ferry headed toward the mouth of the lagoon, the place Zuri had called, where the water meets the cedar. The boatman paddled without hurry, his movements practiced, his silence respectful. Behind them, the skyline glimmered like a city that had no idea a legend was unfolding beneath its bridges. Naomi's hand rested protectively on Zuri's shoulder. Keisha sat opposite them, the cedar box in her lap and the key still warm against her chest. Her heart pounded with every splash of the oar. Baba Kola stared at the horizon. We are going toward the place where all Lagos stories end, he murmured. The river mouth. The sea waits there, and the sea does not forget debts. Zuri leaned over the boat's side, her reflection rippling. It's calling us, she said softly. It said the drum never stopped singing. It just needed someone to listen. Keisha exchanged a glance with Naomi. Neither spoke. They both knew that since the moment they met this child, logic had been a spectator, not a rule. The boat drifted into the wide, restless mouth of the lagoon. Wooden stilts gave way to open water. The current pulled harder, whispering secrets beneath its breath. Zuri pointed to a cluster of weathered mangrove roots forming a natural arch. There, she said. The boatman frowned. That's forbidden water, madam. No one goes there. People say there's a spirit that guards it. Kola smiled faintly. Then we'll go politely. The man muttered a short prayer under his breath and steered them in. Beneath the mangrove arch, the water changed color, from murky brown to dark green, as if it had crossed into memory. The air grew cooler. The sound of the city vanished. Keisha's pulse slowed to match the lazy heartbeat of the tide. Zuri stood, balancing easily despite the boat's sway. This is it, she said. The tide's left hand. The place the drum wanted us to find. Keisha rose too, the cedar box trembling in her hands. She opened it. Inside lay the second ledger, the wooden carving, now cracked open and quiet, and Pelumi's final letter. She unfolded the letter carefully. The paper smelled of smoke and seaweed. The handwriting was unmistakably his, firm even in age. If you are reading this, it means the drum has spoken. To whoever carries this letter, thank you. The water keeps what the world cannot. Beneath the tide's left hand lies not gold, not jewels, but the truth of a name that greed tried to erase. Zuri Ebel is my child, born of Ebel Akand, the only woman who ever made me remember the sound of home. I gave her name to the sea so that even if men buried my confession, the water would tell it to someone brave enough to listen. Let the drum witness it once more. Blood should never be hidden for profit. If my empire dies with this truth, then let it die clean. Pelumi Adeyemi. The paper shook in Keisha's hands. She looked up to find tears streaming down Naomi's face. Boba Kola bowed his head and whispered, "Amen." But Zuri simply smiled, a small, knowing smile. "He didn't die," she said quietly. "He just went home." Keisha frowned. "What do you mean, baby?" Zuri pointed to the water. "Listen." They all fell silent. And then, faintly beneath the boat, the water began to thrum. The same rhythm from the museum. Beada, beada, beadada. The boat rocked gently. The current circled them like a dance. Keisha felt her eyes sting with awe. "The drum," she whispered. "It's answering." Zuri knelt and dipped her hand into the water. He said the sea knows every shore. It just needed his name to come back. The current surged, and suddenly something wooden brushed against the boat's underside. The boatman shouted and pulled his paddle in. A small, sealed chest floated up, barnacle-streaked and ancient. Keisha and Kola hauled it aboard. The key from Keisha's neck fit perfectly into its lock. Inside were stacks of documents sealed in wax, a black velvet pouch, and an old photograph, Pelumi as a young man holding baby Zuri in his arms beside Ebel. Behind them stood a small cedar house. Naomi gasped. So it was true. He'd been planning to leave everything to her all along. Kola examined one of the documents and whistled low. Titles. Deeds. Every property, every account. Signed and notarized offshore. He made sure she could never be erased again. Keisha turned to Zuri, her voice trembling. "You're the heir, sweetheart. The real one. Not the Caldwell Foundation. Not anyone else." Zuri tilted her head. "Then what happens now?" Before Keisha could answer, the rumble of a motor echoed across the water. A speedboat. Emerald green. Ms. Caldwell. She stood at the bow, wind whipping her hair, rage carved deep into her elegant face. "I should have known the nurse wouldn't stop meddling," she shouted over the engine. "You think you can rewrite legacy with fairy tales?" Keisha's voice carried back strong. "We didn't rewrite anything. We uncovered it." Caldwell laughed, but the sound cracked. "That old man's guilt doesn't change the law. The Foundation holds everything now." Zuri's small voice cut through her words. "Then the law needs to listen to the drum." She reached into the chest and lifted a tiny gong, a miniature talking drum, perfectly preserved. Its skin was pale, its cords threaded with gold. Caldwell froze. "That drum," she whispered. "No. He couldn't have." Zuri struck it once. "Boda." The sound rippled outward, not loud, but deep enough that even the boatman gasped. The air shimmered. The water responded with a low hum. Then, from the mangroves, voices rose. Dozens, hundreds, layered like echoes of time. Fishermen, mothers, old market women, all chanting Pelumi's praise name. Adeyemi, son of Ebel's river. The emerald boat's engine sputtered. Caldwell's men looked around, terrified. The sound of the voices grew, weaving through the air like wind through leaves. Caldwell shouted, "Stop this. This is madness." Keisha called back, "No, it's justice." The water surged once, lifting their ferry higher, then calmed again. When the ripples settled, the chest in Keisha's hands glowed faintly, and then the light faded, leaving only quiet. The sea had spoken. Caldwell's boat drifted backward, powerless. The driver panicked and turned them around, retreating into the distance. For the first time since the hospital, Keisha let herself breathe without fear. Zuri turned to her and smiled. "He's resting now." He said thank you. Keisha knelt and hugged her tightly, whispering, "You did it, baby. You fulfilled his last wish." Months later, the story made every headline. Nurse and orphan reveal hidden heir to billionaire empire. Pelumi Adeyemi's lost daughter found. Foundation under investigation. Ms. Caldwell faced charges for document forgery and fraud. The courts upheld Pelumi's original affidavit and offshore deeds. The empire legally transferred to Zuri Ebel Adeyemi, with Naomi Cole appointed her guardian until adulthood. Bob Akola moved into a quiet home near the sea, where he spent his mornings telling stories to neighborhood children. And Keisha? She returned to Atlanta, her license reinstated, her reputation restored. But she kept one thing from Lagos, the small miniature drum Zuri gave her before they parted. "You should keep it," Zuri had said, "so you don't forget the sound of courage." Now it sat on Keisha's nightstand, silent but alive. Sometimes, in the middle of a quiet night, when rain touched the window and thunder murmured like an old friend, the drum would hum, "Beada, Beada, Beada," and Keisha would smile, knowing somewhere across the ocean, a little girl with cowrie-tipped braids was safe, powerful, and unafraid, carrying the weight of her father's last wish like a crown she was born to wear. The world would know her name. Zuri Ebel Adeyemi. And the nurse who helped fulfill an old man's final request would forever be part of her legend, the keeper of a promise sealed in rhythm and tide.